The first project I want to talk about is the 588 project. It started with when I was interested in mud. I was interested in mud because I think it's an in-between material between solid and liquid, and I didn't know exactly why I was interested, but I was going online and looking for things that are related, and then I came across this site that completely, froze me, and I was like, what is this? So, it's a site by a guy called himself the Bogeyman. Bog is some kind of mud in English. And apparently, in this site, he explained how to sink completely and disappear in mud, where to find good mud to sink in, how to make your own mud pit in your own backyard, what are the dangerous things you need to know in order to fulfill your passion to sink in mud. That was the first time I ever encountered this fetishism, which is very particular. We're not talking about mud wrestling or, playing with mud. We're talking about people that completely disappear in mud till they cannot be seen. So I went through that, but the pivotal moment was when I discovered this image of him. This is part of his archive. This is the Bogeyman. He's 40-something years old. He lives in British Columbia, Canada, with his parents. He studied meteorology, but actually on his free time, he goes to the wilderness and he documents himself completely sinking in mud. Most of the time, like 99%, he would be alone. When I saw those pictures, I said to myself, well, this guy is some kind of a spiritual brother of me, although I never did it. I have to get in contact with him. And of course, I didn't know why I want to be in contact with this guy, but I managed to track him down from a forum of deep sinkers. Deep sinkers are the people that are going deep into the mud. So I managed to find his email. I emailed him. I said, hey, I'm an artist. I live in New York. I'm a student, actually. I was a student back then. I want to do something with you. He was very suspicious at the beginning, was very friendly, but he thought that I'm some kind of a producer that wants to make him into a star. It didn't help. I explained several times that you would not become a star if you be in my movies, not like a Hollywood star at least. But we became we had some conversations, and he had a lot to say about this process of getting into the mud. So at that moment, I realized that he's a one-man band, and actually what he's doing is completely perfect with the way he's doing it, and maybe there's no way for me to interfere with that. So I just collected a lot of his video material and edited a 4-minute short movie that shows his activity. So I'm going to show you this, let's say, 2 minutes out of it.
Thinking. It's like quicksand. me under. I can't get out. I'm gonna fall.
So yes, this is the boogeyman, and it's important to state that everything that you saw was shot by the boogeyman while doing it. So he's actually holding the camera above his head while he's doing it. So I always liked people that are, let's say, like a one-man band that are doing everything. He's the producer, he's the camera guy, he's the actor, he's the narrator, he's the distributor even. So this option of taking your dream forward without needing anybody is interesting for me. And then the second thing that I found really interesting about this phenomena was the fact that actually what he is saying is completely the opposite of what he's doing. While he's saying it's gulping me down, it's sucking me in, he's creating this image that the ground, that the soil is actually sucking him into it. But this is only his fantasy, because if you want to get into this mud, you have to invest a lot of power and a lot of energy. You have to go like this for a long time to do it. So I like this gap between the description and the actual act. I also asked myself, and I never had an answer for that. Why is he doing that? But I can think of, let's say, two trajectories. One would be the sensation of being in the mud itself. You know, the feeling of the mud on the body, thinking that you are drowning. You know, all the physical effect of it. And the other would be like some kind of a post-mortem, because it's all about documentation. He would take this file or tape or whatever it is after that to his home and watch himself dying. Okay? So maybe actually the fantasy is more about watching yourself dead over and over again, because we have this mechanism here that he created, which is the natural eye. His eye is looking at the artificial eye, which is the eye of the camera, and they are connected together in a cycle, which is the hands, and then we have a surface. We'll come back to this surface because in most of my work, I have a surface that cuts something. So this is the surface, and they go like this till the point where the natural eye can no longer look at the artificial eye, and only the artificial eye is documenting. So maybe this is the thing about that. And then because clearly it has some sexual component to that, I cannot say to what extent, but surely there is. So I thought to myself, well, let's think of that in relation to porn. And in porn, as you may know, there is also a quintessential scene, which is the last scene in porn. Not always, but most of the time, the cam shot. And in this cam shot, the human body, male body, presenting itself as a fountain, like this, showing it liquids, yeah, and presenting it. It's like something like this. And here we actually have a reversed cam shot, where the climatic moment, the orgasmatic moment of this fetish is the absence of the body, is the absence of the object, is a clear surface. And that's, for me, was pretty interesting to think about that. So these were the questions that I was asking myself. But of course, I wanted to do something by myself. So I started to explore, and he led me into this secret community of mud sinkers. So what do they do there? They collect archival material about sinking in mud. They have their own production houses making shots, like beauty shots. Most of them are like 99% beautiful women, all like very nicely, dressed or something like that. In the mud, you have this and that. And then the turning point came. One of my discussions with the boogeyman, he introduced me to a guy. He said, well, if you want to do something by yourself, maybe you should contact Fred. So I contact Fred. This is Fred. This is his site. His name is Fred588. He lives in Arkansas. And his passion is not like the bogeyman to sink himself in mud, but to film other people doing it. So he created 3 mud pits in his own backyard, and he pays for models to sink in mud. He's also a director, a distributor, an editor, a composer, whatever you want. And I thought to myself, well, Fred can provide me the facilities. Now I have to come up with an idea. So I researched a little bit about Fred. So this is Fred's mansion down in the woods in Arkansas. This is one of Fred's production, as you can see. What is very interesting about mud fetish films is that it can be any genre. It could be a comedy, it could be a horror movie, it could be sci-fi, as long as the last scene is a sinking scene where at the end everything remains blank. So we are good to go. So this is Fred, his productions, as you can see. From the people that I talked, it's like kind of fun, but this is actually the picture that changed my mind, because Fred is obsessive about documenting, so he would click the camera even when the shot is done, okay? So this, for example, is exactly what those people are not interested in, because it doesn't have the contrast of a beautiful face and frightening mud. But for me, when I saw this, I said, wow, this is the thing, this is what I want to do. And maybe instead of submersion, I should go emergence. So it took me some time, but I came up with this idea in my idea, and now you can remember the film that you saw 2 floors up. There's a blank surface of mud and then heads protruding out of it. You don't know that there are heads in the beginning, and then you discover that they are kind of breathing through tubes. Those tubes leads to trees. From the trees are hanging flute recorders, and mud starts to flow and to come back to the surface. So it was very easy. I took a few friends. We went out to Arkansas. We met Fred. Fred is the guy here in the orange. This is how we made it. We had 2 cameras. His mud pits are quite small. So we always had 2 cameras outside, and we would go into the mud. So a little bit of getting into the mud. So up to this point, it's very, very pleasant. From that point downwards, it's completely scary and kind of even difficult, because the mud is heavier than your lungs and it pressures your body. So this is Fred in his home where we slept. And this is his editing. This is how he makes all his films and distribute them between the fans of this phenomena. This is me and Fred in good times. We spent 5 days there. This is my friend Liz coming out of the mud. When you get outside of the mud goes everywhere. You need like an hour to get it out of your ears and stuff like that. So we started to use earplugs. And then we discovered that wigs will do really good because they will accumulate them out in a better way. At the end, you saw like the last scene there. There's like many heads. So now I can tell you that I wanted a long shot, but there was no possibility to have a long shot because the pit was very small. So I decided that I'm going to make it like a puzzle, something that I like to do, like a collage, to shoot different parts and then to combine them together. So something like that you can only do at night because you need even lighting. And then I said, oh, this could be interesting. So we shot that at night, and it was very funny because if you are in the woods and you turn on like 5 like very strong lights, so very weird animals are coming your way. And at the end, as you can see, as you saw upstairs, it ended up as a 2-channel video installation. I can say that the idea to have it as a 2-channel video installation was only after the work, because from that till that point I never did like a dual screen or double screen. But when I edited this film, I felt that no matter what I do, I have this strong feeling of linearity, because the film itself is like a head and then mouth, then a tube, then a recorder, so it would not break. So I was looking for a way to make something that will be more simultaneous and go like this instead of going like this. And I think that the cut between the two screens and the fact that sometimes it looks like one surface and sometimes they're acting against each other, sometimes with each other, more like a machine, that really helped me. So this is about that. You want to have a question now or question later, like at the end? Later, okay. So we'll go one floor down to the project that is called the multi-pillory. Okay, oh wow, I exposed my, yeah. Okay. So this is, you might recognize the image from above. This is actually the cage of the monkeys at the Bronx Zoo in New York City. So what do we see in this picture? We really have to pay attention to the layers. So all the woods that you are looking at, that looks like real wood, are actually polyester. They are fake. The monkeys that you see sitting are actually real monkeys, and I'm very cautious when I use the word real because for me it's all layers of different representations of reality. But okay, let's say the monkey is a monkey, and at the background, what you see like far away from there, it's actually a poster. It's actually another image that imitates like forest, tropical forest. Okay, so before I did anything to that, we already have like at least 3 layers of representation. So this is the image. I wanted something that will contain those layers. So what we did, we actually glued that on a structure in a space that I found. And then we invited the people. I always work with friends and not always, but most of the time I work with friends and friends of friends. So we built this, let's say, temporal community for this. And actually the idea was to shoot it 360 with a dolly while the people are sticking their heads into it. So this is a production stills. So if we will continue with the thinking about the layering here, so up to this point we had the 3 layers. Now we have the monkeys becomes an image. They are not real monkeys anymore, and now real people are sticking their heads into this image that is in some way becomes one surface, and then a camera is shooting them in 360, so then the image that comes out of that becomes flat again. It's like always a process of flattening like you have in Photoshop, okay? So you do something and flatten it, and then, it's hard to dig the history out of it. So that becomes a video file, and that video file, as you saw, is being screened on the structure again at the room, and then it becomes a projection. And for me, like the difference between a projection and a still, or let's say a still image, is very important because it has to do with the relationship between the image and the surface. While in a picture that we can hold in our hands, the image is married to its surface. In a projection, the image is, let's say, is a guest. The image is lying temporarily on something, but it does not connect to that at all. To my opinion, it's just light on a surface, so it becomes that. And I think that those thinking about layering and the way that we can separate or not separate them and the way we perceive reality is also echoing in the way that the structure is being placed in the space itself. Because then you, as the viewer, can act like the camera on the dolly, because you can go around this structure and see what it is. And this was the first time I did something that is relating to the history of its own structure. I repeated that in Venice, but I think this was the first seed of that, because when you look around, when you go around this multipillory, so you recognize the structure from the video, but of course, so you can think for yourself, even like just to go with it, well, maybe those people were here, maybe it's the same structure, maybe they just replaced, the front panel, okay? So for me, it's like about an object that contains its own history, some kind of a revolving door of memory turning inside a revolving door. It is interesting to say, like what you saw there is a continuous loop. I never tell what is the exact length of this movie, because it's actually it's a composition of many parts. But I want to tell you something from the process. For those people who needed to hold themselves in this position, it was very difficult physically. And as you can already see, physical challenge is something that repeats in my work, because I think in some way it bypasses acting, which I really hate. So those people that needed to hold their hands, to hold their heads inside those holes, it was kind of difficult. And in some point, they could only last for, let's say, 2 rounds. In some point, I started to sing with them. I had this idea, maybe we should make noises of animals while we're doing it. And it was very weird that while we were doing this, they managed to do twice the time they were doing all the time. So for me, it was just, wow, when your brain is occupied, your body can go like, but just something that went through this. So a little bit about the reference for this work. I think it came from 2 different, very opposite directions. So for one, is this punishment coming actually? Yes, I should start with this. Was a mistake. Coming from the mid ages. You all know the stocks and the pillories, and it's all about humiliation in public, usually about isolating a person and putting him in a humiliating position. So this I know because, this what you see in Europe. But then I discovered that actually in China, it was a different version. What they did is they didn't fix the body to something in the center, let's say, of the town or of the city. They would put a pillory on a person's head and let this person live like that. Okay, so this board is not attached to a place, but attached actually to the body. What does it create? It creates a situation where a person cannot take care of his face or her face. You can wipe your ass, but you cannot clean your face. This is like the bisection of the body in the most specific and accurate way I can think of. It's actually kind of a guillotine in a way. It has to do with bisection, and of course when I saw this I thought of like taking this and turning it around, and then I also saw that they had version like a communal versions that they would put people together. So for me, that I always work with, let's say, groups or communities, and I'm trying to work on the tension between the individual trying to express him or herself and the need for a group, let's say also the tension between support and abuse each other. So those people in, let's say, in this situation, you can think that they are supporting each other, but also you can think that they are abusing each other. So I try to relate to this torture device from the medieval ages, and The second reference for this work is actually a very stupid one, who I really liked from a very early age. I will call it Stick Your Head. You know it from parks or, I don't know, zoos. So you can become somebody else. You can stick your head and become a turtle. I remember when I was a kid, there was like cowboys town in southern of Israel, and you can become a villain. And I always liked that. So I think this work is a combination between the two of them, and it talks maybe about our needs or the way that we are forced to become a collective image, okay, in our days. A collective image that also contains abuse and support, and not all the time knows how to differentiate between them. The third project would be the Romanian Project. So the Romanian Project, where the Romanian Project, 5 Band for Romania, that you can see here, started with a very, let's say, abstract passion that I had. It started because I wanted to hear a lot of amplifiers under the ground playing together, just like that. And from that seed, it grew to different places. So I just wanted to tell this in the beginning, because now I'm going to make a detour and start from somewhere else that actually I only realized later in the process. So let's imagine that this is the beginning and go like this. This is 1991, Moscow. We have to Metallica. Let's look for 2 minutes. Can you get a little bit more volume? So I was 16 when this happened. I think I saw it a year later. Maybe somebody brought a VHS tape, and I was really amazed by it. Just a moment. Yeah. Yeah. So this is for me the beginning of the connection between heavy metal and Eastern Europe. It's an intuitive, maybe historical connection that I became aware after I had this idea of burying the amplifiers, started to ask myself, okay, what music should be buried under the ground? And then I understood that it's all about compression. What I'm looking for is compression. And where you find compression, you find it mostly in distortion, which is actually the limitation. It would be difficult to explain, but you limit something and then you create more activity within this limitation. You create compression, actually. And with heavy metal, I mean, like, it's the most compressed okay, not maybe, but as a genre, as a let's say mainstream genre, this is the most compressed music that I can think of. So I thought heavy metal, also with its let's say content, the morbid content of heavy metal, I thought it would be great to hear that from under the ground. And then immediately I said like, okay, I have to go Eastern Europe, and I didn't know why. So later I understood that it's actually related to this concert that I heard when I was a teenager. And that made me think, okay, so this is a very historical moment for me because you can see the confusion within the identity of the people there. The army that are actually 19 or 18-year-old boys are calling, they have to guard the show, yeah, to protect, but actually they join, most of them join the crowd in this very strong moment. And I thought to myself, well, how come heavy metal became, to some extent, the emblem or the soundtrack of this very political moment? Because heavy metal is not political in the let's say in the sense that we think about activity, not like, let's say, rap music that are coming from the ghettos against the oppressor, saying like, you know, unlike punk music that are saying fuck the system, or do it yourself, that has like an agenda against the power. Heavy metal, and I'm doing a very broad generalization, is more concerned and more dealing with the individual, is dealing with death and, let's say, dreams, existential matters, universal content, and not calling usually to direct act against somebody, and not taking like a side. It's most of the time us and them. Them is the system in large. Yeah. So it was interesting to me to think how come this kind of music became the image of this very, very political moment. I think of course, it represents freedom in a very, broad way. And when we come to think about this is a very innocent moment. Because, I don't know, as a teenager, I thought that we in the West are bringing, after so many years, the light to those miserable people. This is what I was told as a kid, okay? Little did I know that this is dream called democracy, yes, this, paradigm, has a secret passenger within its ship, and that called capitalism. Nobody knew that exactly at that time and what this form of capitalism mean. And nobody thought that, well, to implant this paradigm into a body that is not used to it will create a lot of friction. So for me, this project is actually looking back to this moment, looking at myself in a way. I'm saying something very personal here, but this is what I feel about that. So I went to Romania. So first of all, I had this image in my mind. I decided that I want many bands together to bury their amplifiers. I want all the cables to lead to the center. I want to have an event. I want interaction. So from that point, it's quite easy. You just Google heavy metal in Romania. You get like hundreds of bands. You go there. You visit the clubs. You meet with the people. I made the appointments in advance from Israel, and I met with 10 Romanian heavy metal bands, and to my very surprise, all of them agreed to participate in this project. At the end, I chose 5, but it was weird to, not weird, but it was surprising to me, because metal is very much about virtuosity. You know, people that are playing metal are really, really good players. It's not about take your guitar, express yourself. No, it's about sit in your room and practice till you know how to do tapping so fast that everybody will adore you, and then you can play metal maybe, and you have to know harmonies, and it's very complex music. So for me, it was a surprise that they were going with me to do something that will change their sound completely and the way they play. But eventually they agreed. So we went there. Everything that you see here is actually what you already saw. So I just want to say that in the back of my mind, I also had this image of collective burial, because with my memory and maybe with yours as well, when we see a bunch of people marching into a field in Eastern Europe, digging a hole in the ground, it's not a movie with a good end, okay? So somebody would shoot somebody will fall into the pit, and then it will get buried. So I'm playing with that as well. Yes. So it took us actually more than 48 hours. We had like a camp there. And for me, it's very important that this process is as much as not interrupted as I can. Okay, and that means that I have to lose control to some degree. So 3 cameras are rolling all the time, documenting almost everything. The idea itself is directed. I mean, I say to them, okay, you come from here, you go to here, you dig the pit, you connect your musical instruments, you play, and then everything is go like with this direction. But I very rare that I would stop, the event to say, okay, you will stand here, you will be here. So for me, what's important is the energy. In order to maintain the energy, you must diminish your control over it. Because when you have 3 cameras rolling all the time, you don't want to sit in a tent and look at 3 monitors. You want to run between them and encourage the people in real time, just to be there, part of the action. This is what's important to me. And maybe I will say something about, you've seen a few projects now, and it seems that each one of them is going like to a different direction. So for me, art is less about the mundane, although I sometimes like artists that are dealing with very simple things about, the life around us. But for me, personally, art is about the possibility to find yourself in a situation that you would not find yourself otherwise. Art as an excuse to hang out with 20 metalists for 48 hours. That's good enough for me. So, yes, I think that one you saw. This is how I plan it, but I show this image because I want to tell you that to me, I'm not dealing so much with stories and narratives, I'm more dealing with structures. So if you want to have like the core of the idea, this is the core of the idea, not the story. This is the mechanism of how things relate to other things. This is just, some references. Okay, so now about this sound room. So I talked about compression. There are 3 layers of compression in the work. The first layer is the distortion itself, the meaning of, not the meaning, but the essence of distortion. The second layer is burying 20 amplifiers inside the ground. And the third layer is that cube, which occurs actually not in the real event, but here in the space. So this is a box that you can maybe think, maybe this is an amplifier, maybe you are inside it, maybe it has to do with the compression of the sound, but also it's a hint about an editing room. And this is also important to mention, that my approach towards reality or towards documentation is not to try to bring you what happened, but to try to do something else, or to try to understand the potential of the material that I create. By saying material, I mean everything that I record becomes the material, and this ends up in the editing room. And then I feel that I have the liberty to sculpt, this would be the best word, to sculpt into this sound and to make it into something else. So this room for me is also like the feeling of an editing room. So this is it with the glass and it creates this, I don't know if it happened to you because you came as a group, but it creates this situation where you sit there and somebody crosses and you see people crossing and they look into the glass and they don't know that there are people there and it becomes funny. So for me, this distance, now, this is something new about this work, that this distance between the screen and the glass has become a place that I want to explore, that I never till now was managed to isolate, and now I think to some extent I can look at it more because I'm interested in that. So this is it, I think. This is, by the way, from the previous installation, but soon we'll have new ones from here that came out even better. So the last work would be Swarm, and at the beginning I will tell this would be the shortest because Swarm was born a few days ago. It started in our studio. Maybe I'll put an image so you don't... okay. This is a drawing of mine from the age of 8.5 that I don't know. So it reminded me the pens or whatever. So, yes, Swarm was born a few days ago here in the basement, and it took us a lot of time to form it. But actually, we started almost a year ago. Me and Ira, that is working with me, that is here with us, and a few other people. And we actually, we are building a whole, let's say, surrounding of styrofoam in the studio, in which we operated those micro drones by ourselves, and then applied this hot wire in order to cut this structure. So if we want to talk, if we want to look about the work, it's I think it's rather abstract right now. I'm still trying to understand it. That's why it's kind of difficult to talk about it for me. But I would say that within a styrofoam architectural environment, there are three elements occurring with relationship between them. The operators, those people that you saw behind glasses that you cannot see their faces, mostly this part of the body, yes. The drones that are maybe operated by the operators, behaving sometimes as individuals, sometimes as small groups, sometimes as maybe swarms. And you have the hot wire. The hot wire is the element that cuts, like in the multipillory, like in the 588, in any of my work, there's many layers of cutting. But the hot wire is actually slicing. That's what the hot wire is doing. And this is one of the reasons I chose styrofoam. I wanted a material that would be related to building itself, that is real. You build buildings out of, I mean, like you put styrofoam inside buildings, but also you make models out of styrofoam. And this is a material that you can really cut, like with the hot wire. And I wanted a cut that is not like, you know, violent in the way of like, but more something like that. So I wanted this movement to, I think this is why I chose the styrofoam. So this comes from my growing interest in swarm behavior, which is swarming is a theory that relates to superorganism. Actually, we can say in simple words, million minds act as one mind. And it's a fascinating topic for me because I think, I know that swarms, one of the things that make them efficient is the fact that they communicate without language. And this is something that is very important in my works. And they don't communicate in language because language is just too slow, okay? They transmit and they sense signals from each other that they can make decisions very, very fast. And I think, and it has to do with this ability, but also the connectivity is very important. All the members of this superorganism has to be connected in some way. So I think to some degree we are becoming some kind of a swarm not in the direct, simple sense of like there's something controlling us and we are all following it. No, exactly the opposite. Without a center, without a distinguished head or brain, we are connected somehow to each other, and by forces or interest, we are performing swarm behavior. And that is, for me, super interesting. The drones are those creatures. I mean, they are very mechanic, but they're also very, they look like humans to me, or bugs in a way, and they are related most of the time to watching, okay? So everybody's talking about drones flying around, you know, collecting material, collecting data and stuff like that. But I actually wanted to look at them, not to look from them. Each drone is a floating eye in the space, and I think we are, vision has become multiplicity. We are no longer looking at something like that. We are all the time looking at things from multiple angles. So I wanted to do the opposite, actually, to be frontal again and to look at them as some kind of a phenomena. To end this, I would show you a part of a documentary about swarms. Yes, and a very interesting fact that was discovered about locust that I think will tie and connect other things from other works. So let's play this and then I will explain to you.
Mormon crickets, and you can see one in the middle there chowing down on his buddy, and it's beginning to drag it along. Why it drags it along? Well, if it stops, it risks being eaten itself. And we studied Mormon crickets in Utah and Idaho, and as you can see, there are roads, and that makes research significantly easier. And you know, here's a roadkill.
Sorry. Ooh. Okay. So what have we just seen? And I think this is an example. Everybody likes to talk about swarm because they can collaborate together. They've always been like the example of the best collaboration. How come like billions of bees can know exactly where to go together, and they must, you know, have the best collaboration. We should imitate them. And then they looked at locusts. And locusts are actually, they have two modes. They have the swarm mode and the individual mode. When times are good and they have food, they don't go together. They just go around. Each locust is doing whatever he or she or eat wants, and they're just chewing things, you know, they eat, yes? And when times are bad, they go as one tribe, but they go together because they eat each other. They are cannibalistic. So the fact that they're actually moving in the same direction is because each one of them is trying to eat the other and not to be eaten. So the motivation of them is not so much, you know, optimistic, utopian collaboration. So there are many ways to control, and many ways to hide control, and many ways to establish that. And with that, I will maybe end, and maybe we'll have some questions. Thank you.
I am interested in the significance of your exhibition here. You mentioned the unhappy endings of open pits in Central Europe. Does that sort of figure into this? And curious if you could just give us an idea of what it means to be here for you.
Here you mean?
In Szczecin, in this part of the region. Your first Polish exhibition, I understand, and
yes,
to be in this city in particular.
That is true, and I am from Polish origins, and my romance and relationship with Poland has a history. Although it's my first show in Poland, I made a video. Maybe my first video is titled "Lublin's Grip," but we won't get into that right now. So for me, it's not such a political thing of, you know, being an Israeli in Poland. No, it's just, this building actually, coming to this building and looking in it and understanding that this building can enable me to do something that is really challenging for me. And this has to do what Sergio explained a few times with the layering, the above and below kind of relationship, and the ability to put for several works that will hopefully correspond with each other. So this is mainly, my motivation here.
No, thank you very much for your talk and this exhibition. I enjoyed it so very much. And I was interested in what you were saying about these ideas of us and them, and that also from your earliest work from 2005 that you were saying that one cannot clean their face. I kind of was interested in this idea of connectivity that has been mentioned so much in your work, of connecting the kind of projected media as well as the projected media and the sculpture itself, and connecting that with ourselves. And I think the question that I was coming at was that I was wondering if you were part of this mud culture or this mud fetish, or if you have been in this hardcore band situation. And you also talked about kind of the West was hierarchical for yourself and that it was better, or you mentioned something like that.
Can you repeat again the last sentence?
You mentioned that the West had this idea that it was better or something. Yeah. And so now in this time of kind of post-colonialism consciousness, I was wondering, how does metaphor actually function in your work, and is that a viable trope aesthetically to utilize that to affectively influence people, and how do you work with this?
I try. It's complex what you just described, and you touched many topics. So I'm trying to find a way to relate. But if I will stick with the word metaphor, so I would say that I'm trying not to relate to things as metaphors at all. Of course, it can be, the viewer can develop metaphors out of the work, but for me what I'm trying to create is, let's say, a set of tools or a pool of elements that I think are connected with some relationship between them that will encourage you to work within them and to create your own meaning. And if metaphor, I'm not exactly sure I know what metaphor is. If it's something that is representing something else, I just try not to limit things, like to say like, okay, this represent that and this represent that. It's like more like billiard, balls banging into each other in a surface. There's like physics and correlation between them.
I think what I was also asking is about montage. I mean, putting one thing against another thing, and then in our mind, we create an idea and we connect. And in your work, there's so much connectivity, and also in this installation that is very eloquent. But then I guess my question is, in this kind of connecting with montage, which metaphor does, like, where does kind of subjectivity and where does that kind of come through? I mean,
subjectivity?
Not subjectivity. I guess my subjectivity in that, I mean, in a kind of idea of, I was wondering about these bands. You're observing these people. And so that's why I feel it's more as a symbolic more than, that's why I asked, like, were you part of these, and is that not necessary, and is that like a viable way to?
Yes, it's true that I'm not part of like the mud fetish, let's say, phenomena, or I'm not part of any heavy metal band. And it's true that I'm looking from outside in a way. And I think like maybe the tension between inside and outside is very, I mean, something that I find much more complex than that. I mean, I think that even if a heavy metal guy would do a film about his band, he would still look from outside to some extent. And even when you make a film about yourself, inside and outside goes like in very weird relationships. So I'm not so particular about the definition between inside and outside, but this is a very important, let's say, pivot, right? So I'm trying to be as involved as I can when I do that. For me, this when I try to create this event, I try to do. When I go like to the mud, so I would go into the mud by myself, just because I'm curious, not because I think the artist should do something or like that. Because I traveled all the way to Arkansas. I want to get into the mud. It's like it sounds really tempting. And the idea of spending time with those heavy metal group, to me, maybe I want to belong them. Maybe I never had the chance to be things that I wanted. So I belong for limited time, and then I just try to be there. That's it. And I don't think that I will ever be able to look from inside on something, maybe. Maybe this pill cam, the one that you swallow and takes photographs of your stomach. This is my best idea.
Okay. Any questions?
Firstly, thanks very much for a fascinating talk. I just wanted to ask why the flutes or the wooden recorders? Is there any meaning behind it that you were trying to infuse into the piece?
I think, first of all, because they are extension of the benches to some extent. They are made out of wood themselves. They are very basic, and they refer to sexual origins, the male sexual origin, but not in the way that the holes are filling all, let's say, the body of it, and then the fluid that is coming. So it's all about, let's say, how do you say? Fertility, self-fertility. So you have a mechanism that is fertilizing itself in a way. So it's coming through that, and also because of the sound, the music. But this is when we get into, for example, the sound of this piece. So everyone who plays flute or recorder knows that if you blow from behind, you would not get any sound. And in you can hear sound from a way that, and most of the sounds are completely accurate to what was there. The breathing sounds, for example, are from a CD that I found for medical students that wants to be doctors, and then they are examined on how lungs disease sound like from a stethoscope. So you would hear like, and then you have to say, oh yes, this is bronchis, pastis, number, this and that. You have to recognize them. So I take sounds from many places. It depends. Most of it is recorded on site. But for example, with the flute, I wanted to do something that is completely like, you see it and there's like liquids going inside them, and still you hear them like screaming like, animals, maybe, So at the end, it's creating a system, and I just thought that the flutes were part of this system. I cannot really, justify that with the best explanation, anything that I do, actually.
You mentioned the political elements or the non-political elements per se. The use of drone technology is now becoming, is a means of political control. It's hard not to read that into it. I'm curious as to what you were thinking when you applied that in this context, and was that an element of the process?
About drone technology?
About drone technology and its political uses. I mean, it's as often with technology, it starts with the military and then moves into everyday life. And that's what's happening now with the drones. But the hallmark use of drone technology is this idea that we can monitor and make war and create death from afar, from a distance, from a removal, sort of like the disintermediation with the box and the bands. And it's hard not to. I mean, I'm just curious as to what you were thinking when you use that drone technology in the work.
So yes, there are many things about drones that are interesting. You mentioned a few of them, and I think it has to do with control. And as you made the connection, like the cables from the amplifiers to the players are just like the unseen lines between the operator of the drone and the drone. You just don't see the line, but there is a line of control there. So I'm thinking lines of control are becoming more and more invisible, and this is one thing. The other thing would be the multiplicity of vision in relation also to art. I always imagine the Georges Bataille eye, the single eye, going through the whole of the Étang donné of Marcel Duchamp, going like this. And then you have drones, like eyes, floating in the space. So for me, it's like a magical moment when you think about the possibilities of art. Then you have the democratization of the top view, which is super political. The fact that you can order in Walmart something and then look from above. Before that, it was very particular to the ruler or to the structure of power. They had only the power to look on us from above, and now we can all do it. And the swarm behavior. For me, this is the most interesting thing, because this is now being developed mostly in Switzerland. Huge swarms of drones that can work together, building stuff or attacking or whatever. And this is the connection, and thank you for that question, because it brings it to the cutting. Why swarms are so efficient for attack is because they cannot be cut. They cannot be attacked. It's a body without a body, okay? So this is actually, I think, is a scary future for me, The disappearance of the body and the head, Once you had a king, you could chop the head, you will win the war. Those days are over. So now we are becoming into in the idea of a swarm, you would not even know where to hit, And you would not know even where is it coming or where is it controlled from. So this is what I'm finding interesting about them, and this is what I try to explore in this work.
If I may add something also, I think that it's very important that, as you said, swarms, drones, we already associate that with the invasion of privacy, and we don't really see the machine. We see the eye behind that machine. And in this work, Gilad goes back to the symbol of the drone, to this. We know there's an eye, there could be an eye there, but we see the eye without seeing it. We are observing actually those drones behaving as locusts. So in a way, it's like a symbol, like the heavy metal music for Eastern Europe, like the view of the drones. It's about a symbol of something else that we know that's what scares us, but we don't see that. We see something else. So.
Każda z twoich prac, Gilad, posiada swego rodzaju autonomię. Można powiedzieć, że jest odrębną, skończoną opowieścią. Jednocześnie proces, w jakim powstają te prace i sensy, jakie te prace tworzą, pozwala wciągnąć je pod jeden wspólny mianownik. Mianownik ten nadaje tym pracom pewną widoczną spójność, stanowi o bardzo jasnym przekazie Twoich prac. W tych pracach jest również bardzo interesujący, inaczej może, w procesie powstawania tych prac jest bardzo interesujący też Twój udział. Stanowi to dla mnie o jakiejś totalności Ciebie jako artysty. Widzę Ciebie po prostu w tych pracach jako artystę totalnego. I stąd moje pytanie. Jaka jest funkcja kuratora w sztuce, jaką uprawiasz?
Actually, for this exhibition, it's kind of clear to me what's the curators are not usually involved in the process of making works. That goes for most of the things that I do, unless it's a project that is developing really together. But mostly curators are creating context. That's what I think between works. So for this actually show, it's very clear that we needed to come up with a composition, a good composition for a show, you know. The works exist, okay? 3 of them. One will be, let's say, a site-specific one. So even that decision, you know, just like, let's take 4 works. Let's take this, that, and that. Let's put this above. Let's put this here, you know. That's a lot to discuss. And with Sergio, who knows all my works like really, really good, it's a very easy discussion, you know, because at the beginning we just started, hey, let's put this here, let's do this. No, we won't put this work. This work better with this work, you know. So for this actually exhibition, this is the dialogue, you know. I make works, yes, and then I need to have shows. I don't need to, I mean, like, and so sometimes the show is one project, and then you can ask what is the role of the curator, but I can really answer even that, because for me it's very important to work with somebody that will go the way with you, you know. It's not about, I'm less interested in the curatorial of putting many artworks of different artists together and creating like a theme. It can work sometimes, I've seen good shows, but honestly I'm more into, you know, coming into a world of an artist. So, but still, and even more, I think the role of the curator is more important here, because you need a companion to do that. You need somebody who knows your work really well and knows what goes with what and will tell you, maybe we should do something here new at the basement. Maybe you will adopt the new work that you're working on. And he's been to my studio. He knows like even works in progress, you know. So I could not do it without Sergio, especially in this event. I mean, sometimes, you know, we have a fixed work and we have a space, and then it's just part of our relationship and process. But especially with this one, it was a lot of work of deciding, you know, about composition.
Gilad, I think you know which work is my favorite, and I would like to thank you for a few very good words about metal musicians. I think your opinion is true, and it's fantastic because many people outside the metal think that it's only a noise, not a technique, music, thinking about how to express what I feel, what I think in this kind of music. Metal is full of very good music artists, I think. And also they participate in your work.
You are absolutely right that when you say that metal have don't deal with the with the ideological issues. That's true, because metal is mainly about to play louder, faster, more intense, and with full of expression and distortion, of course. So that's true. Mainly bands singing in lyrics about death, gore, themes, and it's true. And in this context, I would like to ask that for me, it's also another part of meaning of this work, 5 bands from Romania, is that I think only death metal it was a good solution to bury the amplifiers in the ground, because these bands plays for the dead people. Not, of course, we heard from the ground, but for me, it's a music which name is death. It's playing for the dead. And my thinking in the context of Metallica concert in Moscow, that there is more than 1 million people there. But in the ground, there are milliards, billions people buried. So maybe it's when you saw the Metallica concert, you think, what about playing for the dead people? There is many, many more. We could count it. Thank you.
Very beautiful. So now we're starting, you know. Now we can start going somewhere, you know. So yes, I didn't mention, because the time is very limited, and I will make a detour. The structure of this event was based actually on another legendary show, which is Pink Floyd in Pompeii. Okay, in '71, Pink Floyd performed in the empty amphitheater of Pompeii, a very prestigious, pretentious even, this is back then the most famous band in the world, full of themselves, kids 23 years old, super successful, and they want to perform in the center of what used to be the Western culture, and to talk not to people, they want to talk to the stars. Okay, if you read the lyrics and you see how it's structured, it's all about set the controls to the heart of the sun. And it's all about talking to history, but what's called deep time, the ancient time. And when they sing about echoes, they mean the echoes of ancient, ancestors. Okay, so and I grew up on that. So in this project, I actually wanted to reverse the structure. Instead of having 1 band in the center, having 5 bands, and instead of talking to the stars, talking to the ground. And by that, yes, talking to the dead, but also the dead are talking. Because why? Because what I'm trying to create is a feedback loop system. This is important, because the players are playing, they're sending the signals into the ground, it goes into the ground. By the way, in this building, it's not going into the ground. For me, it's operating the drones downstairs. You know, those vibrations that goes with this image, for me, in my mind, they go like this, and they formulate themselves in the sound of the drones that are circulating that in the space that used to be a machine room, okay? Where the heart of the building, all the time, like this, okay? So they are speaking to the dead, but speaking from the dead, because the sound that is coming from the ground are coming back to us. To them. Now, what happened in this moment is very important, and it relates to the concert in Moscow. In that structure, they lose their identity. Why? Because they send a particular single, but in this core, down inside the ground, everything is muffled together. Everything, it's now you cannot distinguish yourself from the others, okay? So for me, this is going into the ground and trying to send the signals to the core of the earth and not to the stars, although I like that also. So yes, it's about that.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you, Gilad. Thank you, Mykolai, Mariev, and all the crew. We're finishing the festivities of the inauguration of the show, and it was amazing for us.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.